In this video, I'm going to introduce you to HTML and CSS and just using them as a tool to create websites. So if you're going to use HTML and CSS, you're going to need a text editor. And there's a few that I like that I'd recommend. So Visual Studio Code from Microsoft is pretty good. Atom at atom.io is a pretty good text editor. And Sublime Text as well is a pretty good text editor. But really anything you like, anything that's got syntax highlighting that's going to help you distinguish pieces of code from one another and types of code from other types of code is going to be helpful. And then in terms of resources you can use for HTML and CSS, they're not quite like, say, Objective-C with Apple or Java with Android, where you can kind of find a API reference made by a company per se. What people tend to do with HTML and CSS in terms of reference is use some website like W3 Schools. So W3 Schools is actually a pretty popular reference website for HTML and CSS. And it's got some pretty decent tutorials that go into all the different details of HTML and CSS. We won't be going into them in this level of detail in the course, but if you kind of want to learn particular things about HTML and CSS, a reference website like this is pretty good. W3 Schools is a pretty popular one. Another one that's actually become really popular is the MDN WebDocs website by Mozilla, and very similar idea to W3 Schools. Just for whatever reason, a lot of developers like this one or prefer it. So another good one to check out. So HTML and CSS are core web programming languages used to design websites. And whenever you make a request to a URL, like say this one, what's happening is a server is sending over HTML content and likely CSS content to your computer, and your browser takes that and compiles it and renders it into a website. And it actually produces the actual layout and styling of the website like this. And HTML is handling the structure of the web page in terms of defining sections and defining headers and things like this. And CSS is focused on the style of the website. Things like colors, layout, widths of things, borders of things, those kinds of concerns. And that separation of concerns between structure and style is actually pretty important. So we can go ahead and make our first HTML document now. So HTML documents are made up of text, but then also HTML elements. So this will be our first one. We're just going to say doc type here, HTML. And this element is actually saying that this is an HTML document to the browser. And we can save it as demo.html here. And we'll put in our next HTML element here. We'll say HTML, close HTML. So this here is called an opening tag. This here is called a closing tag. And together they make up an HTML element. Now in practice, like most people, I end up accidentally calling, this an element or this whole thing a tag. That distinction is pretty often just kind of glossed over, but you should know that that's the actual distinction there. So a head is and close head here. This is going to define meta information about the document. So what you typically see in here is the title of the document and other things like that. So I'll say like title, my website. The body is going to contain the actual document content. And it'll contain things like this, like H1, my title, and P, and we'll say some content in a paragraph. And then we can load this file over here in the browser, and the browser will render this. And we'll get something like this. Now I've got it zoomed up a fair bit actually, just so we can see things better, but you'll get something like this. And so H1 is defining a heading, and that's why the browser renders it like this. And then P is rendering a paragraph, so that's why the browser renders it like this. Now with the heading there, H1 is the kind of the largest heading that's intended for the most prominent heading that's intended for the main title of the website. But there's actually a series of heading elements like this. So we can say like H2, and we can say like my subtitle, and we can say P, and we can say like some more content in a paragraph. And we could say H3, and we could say like maybe my subtitle, and we could say, even more content in a paragraph. And this will get rendered like this. And you might notice that like this H3 title here is going to be a lot smaller than this H1 title here. And you might think that that's the purpose of the element there, but not really. That's actually just sort of how the browsers default render that. If you go into headings here, you'll see that there's actually 6 levels of headings. But the fact that it's rendered smaller like that, that's just the browser's default behavior, knowing that you're likely going to want to, have a more prominent title like this, styled larger than a H3 title like that. You can do comments in HTML. So we can say like this, we can say exclamation mark dash dash, and we can say, my comment about this subsection here. And you can do comments like that in HTML, and then this won't actually be rendered here or affect anything here. Another important element is the link element. So we'll just kind of start over here. So I'm going to say href is equal to, and then I'm going to point it towards google.com. I'll say Google here, and I'll just say is the best place for all your web searches. And what this will give me here is a link here where I click on it and it takes me to google.com. So this opening A and closing A, they enclose the actual link text there. And then this href part, that's an attribute. And it's basically saying href is set to google.com, this URL here, and attributes customize the behavior of our HTML elements. In this case, it's basically specifying where the link should go. Now I can put another attribute in here. I can say target is equal to underscore blank. And what this will do is make the link open up in a new tab. And that's another attribute. And it's also modifying the behavior of the element and how it behaves. If I put another paragraph here, by default, paragraphs will have some space in between them. By default, you get that one sort of line break there. But if we want to put a line break in by default in HTML, it doesn't work if I just put in a bunch of spaces like this. I'll still get just sort of this one space here. If I want to force a line break in HTML, I can use an actual tag for that. So use this break tag here. This tag here, and you see that we get this actual forced space there. This tag here has no open and closing tag. You don't actually have to have this slash here in that case. You can do it like this and it will work, but I do that just out of habit. Okay, so another tag we can use, so we can use strong and emph or emphasize. And these are basically going to have the effect of bolding and italicizing text like this. Now in practice, we could completely change the default behavior of these things, but that's in practice what they're used for. HR will give us this horizontal break here. And then we can use an image tag to put an image in our page. So let's just maybe grab an image of McMaster University. We'll find a pretty one. This looks like a pretty nice one. We'll save this image as, and we'll call it McMaster. Replace the one that's there. And I'll say image src is equal to mcmaster.jpg. And if I render this here, I get this thing that looks like this. Now this image is way too big for our page. One attribute that I could use to change that is I could change it with a width. So I'd say width is equal to 200. That'll make it a little bit more manageable there. Now another thing with images from an accessibility standpoint is, let's say there was an issue with this image. Somehow it didn't load, maybe because the link is wrong, or maybe because the server was down. One thing I can do is I can put an alt text. So I can say alt is equal to University Hall. And then that's what will appear here, is that instead when the link isn't working. The reason why we also put in alt text is not just because of that, it's also an accessibility thing. So things like screen readers to helping tell people with, visual impairment issues and that kind of thing, that would actually help them in this case, because then the alt text would be read out to them instead. Another structure we've got in HTML are lists. So we can do unordered lists and ordered lists. If we're going to do an unordered list, would be open UL and close UL tags. And then the list items are with open LI and close LI list item tags. So we can say like Saul, Kim, and Nacho, and we'll get a list like that that's unordered. We can also do ordered lists when something has an order. So we can say open OL and close OL, and then we could just put our list items in there. So like wake up, brush teeth, and then take a shower. And we get an ordered list like this with 1, 2, 3. And we can actually change the style of these things to go by letters and different things like that, or Roman numerals. So there's a lot more you can do with HTML if you keep going into it in terms of different structures you can create. But next we'll talk about CSS, which is used to style the actual documents. And the way CSS works fundamentally is this, is you've got a selector, which is going to specify which elements you'd like to modify the appearance of. And then these declarations, which are going to modify the actual appearance and style of the element. We've got property :value semicolon, property :value semicolon. And you put them together in a declaration block with open squiggly bracket, close squiggly bracket. So CSS code we can put in a few places. One easy place to put it is inside a style element here that you can put inside the head, or other places, but a lot of times you see it inside the head. And if I've got some HTML element I want to style here, like say H2, and I just say like a subtitle here, I could style it with CSS in here. So I could say H2 to select all the H2 elements, and then I could say color, and I could say blue to make the H2 element blue. And now when I load it in over here, I'll get a blue subtitle. Now this will style all of the H2 elements blue. So if I have another one in here and I say like H2, another subtitle, this is also going to be styled blue. So oftentimes we want to actually have styles for particular elements, for specific elements. One way we can do that actually is we could say H1, and I could say style is equal to, and I could put the styles for an element right in here. So I could say like color purple, a title, and we get a purple colored title. Now, when we do CSS like this, it's called inline CSS. Another way that we can reference a particular specific element with CSS is to give elements an ID attribute. So if I were to say here, p ID is equal to error, and I'll just say like error, not going to function, I can actually select this element by its ID. So IDs are actually unique identifiers for elements in a document. So I can say pound error, and I'll say color red, and then that'll style that particular element there red. Now, if I want to style a group of elements together, I can use a class. So if I've got, say, multiple paragraphs here, I can use what's called a class. I'll say class highlight, and then I'll say like another paragraph. I'll say p more paragraphs, and I won't give this one the class. And then this one here, I'll say p class highlight, and I'll say even more paragraphs. And if I want to style these two paragraphs together, I can actually do that now because I've defined this highlight class here, and I can define how it's going to be styled up here. I'll just say dot highlight, and I'll say color orange. And then this will actually then style both those two classes, or both those two paragraphs that are using the class highlight. So it's dot for classes and pound for IDs. You can actually define and use multiple classes. So I can actually say here like underline as well. And then I could define the underline class like this and say that if it's an underline class, make the text underline. And so now this one's got the underline because I'm applying both classes here. All these rules like this, I don't memorize them, and I don't even think people that work with CSS all day memorize them outside of the common ones they use all the time. You definitely want to use a reference for that to go through and figure out like how to do particular things that you want to do, because there's just so many, possible ways to style things. So, okay, let's actually keep going here. So some other kind of tricky rules you can use. One is for links. So if I were to say here, maybe inside this paragraph, I'll say ahref, and I'll say link, and I'll close the link there. So I've just got a link there. And right now it'll render like this, link looks like that. What I can do is I can actually change the way that link is going to behave, specifically when it's being hovered over. And I can say a:hover, and I can actually define what that link should look like when it's being hovered over. And right now, if you look at the default, it's just does nothing actually. But I could say when it's being hovered over, change the color to red, change the text decoration to none. When I do that, now when I hover over the link, we get red link, no underline. Looks kind of nicer that way. So that's actually going to specify the way that things are going to behave just when I'm hovering over the link. One other thing we can do that's kind of interesting is sometimes we want to say that when a particular element is inside another kind of element, I want it to behave this way. So let's just say I've got links inside a list here. So I've got an unordered list, and I've got links inside of that unordered list. And let's say that these links in particular, maybe I'm listing off external websites or something like that. Let's say I want to style those links in particular differently. The way that I can do that with CSS is I can say ULA, and then I could say color green. And what this means is basically all of the links that are inside unordered list elements, those ones should have the color green. And so those links now have the color green, not this purple visited default color. They've got this green color here. And so they still have the hover behavior. That still is being applied from here. But this is some CSS that's basically saying all the elements of this type that are inside an element of this type, apply these behaviors. And then finally, one other thing we could do is, let's just say I want to apply the same rule to a whole bunch of different types of elements. So let's just say I've got some H3 tags here. So another subtitle here. I've lost track of what's what in terms of sub and sub. So H4, and we'll say even less important title. And then I'll say H5 here, and I'll say ID is title. And I'll say, does this even still count as a title? Okay, so I've got like H3 tags, an H4, and this H5 with the ID title. Let's say I want to have some behavior applied to all of those elements. The way I can do that is I can use commas. So I can say H3, H4, and then pound title. And what this is saying is apply these styles to all the H3s and all the H4s and the element with the ID title. And then it's going to apply all those styles. So I could say like background color pink, and we'll get a background color of pink on all of those elements now. And then lastly, you'll notice I'm having to scroll up and down here. My file's getting pretty big. One thing we can do is we can actually keep our CSS in a separate file. So I can copy and paste this code here, and I can reference that external file like this. I just say link rel style sheet href is equal to, I'm going to call it styles.css. That's the name of the file. And then I'll copy and paste the code in here, call it styles.css. And the page itself will actually render the same way. It's just like the styles from the style sheet have just been placed right here inside a style tag. All right, that's an introduction to the basics of HTML and CSS.